Da vi I gang med debatten og åpningstalene.
Start med Castro.
Yes!
Der kom pandringen, vet du. Det varte ikke lenge.
Starter debatten med å snakke spansk.
At 12:01 p.m., we're going to have a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. There will be life after Donald Trump. But the truth is that our problems didn't start just with Donald Trump, and we won't solve them by embracing old ideas. We need a bold vision.
Legg all skylda på Trump.
Universal pre-K and universal health care. Unleashing
Ja, jeg litt enig da. Jeg tror altså, når det ender opp med to kandidater som Trump og Hillary, så det dype problemer.
And that means exciting a young, diverse coalition of Americans who are ready for a bold future. That's what Kennedy did.
Future.
It's what Carter did. It's what Clinton did. It's what Barack Obama did. And it's what I can do in this race. Get back Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, and Arizona, and finally turn Texas blue and say goodbye to Donald Trump.
Det smilet.
Good evening, Texas Southern. I believe that what unites
Det vel de to som poller lavest som starter, eller?
Jo, ja, det. Jeg tror de...
Klobuchar og Castro vel de som har ligget lavest på meningsmålingene.
Ja, det virker som om de går etter stigende rekkefølge på en måte. De går ikke alfabetisk.
Nei.
We have a guy there that is literally running our country like
a guy there? We have a guy there.
Trump.
I think we need something different. I am someone that tells the truth. I don't make promises that I can't keep. I have people's back, and I believe that to win, you bring people with you, and that is how you govern as well. So, you're going to hear a lot of ideas.
Så hun prøver å vinne de moderate da.
But if you see that some of them seem a little off
Det ikke en
track,
dum taktikk det, altså, faktisk. Det mange som står og vipper mellom republikanere og demokrater.
Men der har du allerede Biden da, som holder veldig bra med de. Så jeg vet ikke om det noen vinnende strategi for Klobuchar.
Nei, jeg ser ikke hvordan folk ville valgt henne over han I så fall.
Nei. Det kanskje derfor hun poller så lavt også. Ok, hvem neste nå?
Congressman Beto O'Rourke.
Beto.
It's an honor to be on this debate stage. It is
Ingen
wonderful
spansk?
to be back in Texas, in Houston, back here at TSU. On August 3rd, in El Paso, Texas, two things became crystal clear for me, and I think produced a turning point for this country. The first is just how dangerous Donald Trump is, the cost and the consequence of his presidency. A racism and violence that had long been a part of America was welcomed out into the open and directed to my hometown of El Paso, Texas, where 22 people were killed, dozens more grievously injured by a man carrying a weapon he should never have been able to buy in the first place, inspired to kill.
Nei, det helt sykt, André.
The second,
Jeg hørte hva han sa. Inspired to kill by our president. Hva?
Han linker den... Hva det masse skyting eller skoleskyting? Han linker det til Trump.
Inspirert av Trump.
Ja,
Det utnytting av patos.
La oss håpe moderatorene plukker opp på det og stiller han spørsmål rundt det, for det der latterlig.
Ja, vi får håpe det. Ja, det var intenst, altså. Utnytte de følelsene til å skylde på han og så bruke det I sin egen tale.
Ja, forresten, den skytingen var I den byen han fra.
Ja, El Paso.
Ok, nå det Corey.
Substandard housing, but it was my greatest mentor, a woman named Miss Virginia Jones, who challenged me. She said, boy, if all you see in this neighborhood is problems, that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're stubborn and defiant and going to put forth a vision that can unify people, then we can make transformative change. She was a church woman that said, without vision, the people will perish. Well, that's exactly what we did. We created extraordinary unity in our community, and we did things that other people thought was impossible. That's the story of America. At
Han
our core,
sier
we
det, men
find
statistikken
common
viser jo
cause.
at han jo fra
Differences
New
amongst us
Jersey, den byen der
Democrats
han
on the
var
stage
borgermester
are
i,
not as
har
great
jo
as the urgency for us to
kriminalitet har jo
unite
økt
as a
betraktelig etter at han
party,
ble
not just to
borgermester.
beat
Ja, det er så tullete. Altså, det de har
but to
klart å få
unite
til byen,
America
er masse
in
sånn
common
IT-jobber og
cause
sånne
and
ting.
common purpose.
Men
Mens
de
andre,
laveste
ja,
har ikke
de
fått noe mer.
lavest
That's how
lavest
I will
inntekt
lead this nation.
neighborhoodsa, for eksempel, de er jo bare forfalt under, mens han har vært, er det mayor eller senator?
Hey, Yang.
In America
Kom igjen.
today, everything revolves around the almighty dollar. Our schools, our hospitals, our media, even our government. It's why we don't trust our institutions anymore. We have to get our country working for us again instead of the other way around. We have to see ourselves as the owners and shareholders of this democracy rather than inputs into a giant machine. When you donate money to a presidential campaign, what happens? The politician spends the money on TV ads and consultants, and you hope it works out. It's time to trust ourselves more than our politicians. That's why I'm going to do something unprecedented tonight. My campaign will now give a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month for an entire year to 10 American families, someone watching this at home right now. If you believe that you can solve your own problems better than any politician, go to yang2020.com and tell us how $1,000 a month will help you do just that. This is how we will get our country working for us again, the American people.
Det var sånn 6-7 i salen som var veldig med på det, i hvert fall.
Klobuchar og Kamala ler av han.
Nei, jeg så det ikke.
Det er Kamala som ler nå.
Ja, det hørtes som hennes latter.
Ja, det er det. Så de latterliggjør han, altså. Ja. Det gjenspeiler frykt, føler jeg.
Ja, det som skiller seg at det ikke er typiske kandidaten.
Samme taktikken Kamala brukte mot Tulsi også. Le, men ikke ha noe fornuftig.
They seem more interested in the part about fighting than the part about us. Good politics is supposed to be not about the day-to-day fights of the politicians, but about the day-to-day lives of Americans. We just marked the anniversary of 9/11. All day today, I've been thinking about September 12th, the way it felt when for a moment we came together as a country. Imagine if we had been able to sustain that unity. Imagine what would be possible right now with ideas that are bold enough to meet the challenges of our time, but big enough as well that they could unify the American people. That's what presidential leadership can do. That's what the presidency is for, and that is why I'm asking for your vote.
Roser han Bush nå? Er det det han gjør?
Ja, var det det?
The unity.
So I plan on spending tonight talking with you about my plans to address the problems that keep you up at night. But first, I have a few words for Donald Trump, who we all know is watching. So President Trump, you've spent the last 2.5 years full-time trying to sow hate and division among us, and that is why we've gotten nothing done. You have used hate, intimidation, fear, and over 12,000 lies as a way to distract from your failed policies and your broken promises. The only reason you've not been indicted is because there was a memo in the Department of Justice that says a sitting president cannot be charged with a crime. But here's what you don't get.
Ja, ok.
What you don't get is that the American
Nei, for det hadde ikke noe med at Mueller-rapporten ikke fant collusion med Russland.
And we know that the vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us, regardless of our race, where we live, or
Bare en
the party
memo,
to which
tydeligvis.
we're registered to vote. And I plan on focusing on our common issues, our common hopes and desires, and in that way unifying
Hillary
our
Clinton-kampanjen
country,
2.
winning this election,
Ja,
and
ikke
turning
sant?
the page for
Jeg snakker
America.
om Donald
And now,
Trump,
President
ikke
Trump, you
hva
can
vi
go back
vil
to watching
gjennomføre.
Fox News.
Ja. Hun brenner mange potensielle velgere ved å si sånne ting, altså. Hun gjør det. Hun brenner mange moderate.
Senator Sanders.
Kom igjen.
Let me be blunt and tell you what you don't hear much about in Congress or in the media. And that is, it goes without saying that we must and will defeat Trump, the most dangerous president in the history of this country.
Ok, han nå.
But we must do more. We must do more. We have got to recognize that this country is moving into an oligarchic form of society where a handful of billionaires control the economic and political life of this country. And as president, I am prepared to take them on.
Stemmen hans jo helt ute å kjøre da.
Han høres syk ut. Kjøla. Jeg hørte han på Kyle Kalinske show, da hørtes han helt lik ut, så kanskje han litt syk.
Det ser ikke helt bra ut, ass. Han virker veldig gammel.
Han gjør det. Ja, mer liv I han enn I Biden, da.
Ja.
Det bra han spiller litt på klima også, det ingen andre som har nevnt det enda, det bra. Alle andre har nevnt Trump bad, jeg skal vinne.
All three of my brothers served in military bases here in Texas. That was their ticket to the middle class. Me, I got my big opportunity about a half mile down the road from here at the University of Houston back when it cost $50 a semester. For a price that I could pay for on a part-time waitressing job, I got to finish my 4-year degree and I became a special needs teacher. And after law school, my first big job was back here in Houston. By then, I had 2 little kids, and when childcare nearly brought me down, my Aunt Bee moved in and saved us all. The paths to America's middle class have gotten a lot smaller and a lot narrower. Today, service members are preyed upon by predatory lenders. Students are crushed by debt, and families cannot afford childcare.
Ok, så den talen her går på å distansere seg litt fra Hillary Clinton, elitefolka.
Jeg synes ikke det var en dårlig tale, altså.
Nei, jeg fremstiller seg selv som en som gjorde litt dumme valg rett etter college og fikk barn tidlig og hadde dårlig økonomi.
Well, I refuse to postpone one more minute, spending billions of dollars on curing cancer, Alzheimer's, and other diseases, which if we invest in them, we can find cures.
Det du skal fokusere på? Alzheimer's?
Han trenger egeninteresse.
Den talen skrik om hjelp.
Han ser ned på notatene sine hele tiden. Hva dette for noe?
Look, this is the United States of America. There's never been a single
Har han ikke klart å memorisere en 5-minutters tale en gang?
Det høres bra ut, men det ser så dumt ut. Du sitter og ser ned hele tiden.
It's no longer time to postpone. We should get moving. There's enormous opportunities once we get rid of Donald Trump.
Candidates, thank you.
Skjelvende lette, han var emosjonell.
Det alle talene ferdig. Det første spørsmålet da.
And Vice President Biden, the differences between you and the senators on either side of you tonight strike at the heart of this primary debate. Both Senators Warren and Sanders want to replace Obamacare with Medicare for all. You want to build on Obamacare, not scrap it. They propose spending far more than you to combat climate change and tackle student loan debt, and they would raise more in taxes than you to pay for their programs. Are Senators Warren and Sanders pushing too far, beyond where Democrats want to go and where the country needs to go?
That'll be for the voters to decide that question. Let me tell you what I think. I think we should have a debate on health care. I know that the senator says she's for Bernie. Well, I'm for Barack. I think the Obamacare worked. I think the way in which we add to it, replace everything that's been cut, add a public option, guarantee that everyone will be able to have affordable.
Spiller bare på navnet til Obama.
Number 2, I think we should be in a position to take a look at
Ja, det var det. Det var svagt.
My plan for healthcare costs a lot of money. It costs $740 billion. It doesn't cost $30 trillion. $3.4 trillion a year, it turns out, is twice what the entire federal budget is.
Jeg leste at Biden holder veldig bra med de republikanerne som ikke liker Trump.
Så det flere som sier at han lengre høyere enn demokratene.
Så han kan faktisk vinne en del republikanere som ikke liker Trump, da. Men så det det at det ikke mange av de heller. Altså, Trump holder rundt sånn 80% approval rating blant republikanere. Så det ikke så mye å tjene på.
Han jo den som poller høyest nå også, av alle demokratene, faktisk.
Biden, ja.
Ja, han både over Bernie og Warren.
Det viser jo egentlig bare at det å trekke seg langt til venstre ikke nødvendigvis løsningen, selv om alle Twitter-trollene vil at du skal gjøre det.
So let's be clear about healthcare, and let's actually start where Vice President did. We all owe a huge debt to President Obama, who fundamentally transformed healthcare in America and committed this country to healthcare for every human being. And now the question is, how best can we improve on it? And I believe the best way we can do that is we make sure that everybody gets covered by health care at the lowest possible cost. How do we pay for it? We pay for it, those at the very top, the richest individuals and the biggest corporations.
Det her Bernie og Warren mener de skal skattelegge Wall Street for å betale for universal health care.
That's how this is going to work.
Direct question. You said middle-class families are going to pay less, but will middle-class taxes go up to pay for the program? I know you believe that the deductibles and the premiums will go down. Will middle-class taxes go up? Will private insurance be eliminated?
Look, what families have to deal with is cost, total cost. That's what they have to deal with, and understand. Families are paying for their health care today.
Prøver å bortforklare det.
Ja, politikersvar.
Every time an insurance company says, sorry, that doctor is out of network. Sorry, we are not covering that prescription. Families are paying every time they don't get a prescription filled because they can't pay for it. They don't have a lump checked out.
Du svarer ikke på spørsmålet, da.
Nei, hun bare forteller om problemene igjen.
Ja. Spørsmålet var, vil skatter for middelklassefamilie gå opp? Svarer ikke på det.
Nei, hun gjør aldri det. Hun unngår det spørsmålet hver gang, altså.
Costs are going to go up for wealthier individuals, and costs are going to go up for giant corporations. But for hard-working families across this country, costs are going to go down, and that's how it should work under Medicare for all in our healthcare.
Hva med skatter? Det var det som var spørsmålet her. Ikke hva det koster, hva skatter.
Nei, hun sa ikke noe om skatter. Hun gjør ikke det.
Medicare for all will cost over $30 trillion. That's right, Joe. Status quo over 10 years will be $50 trillion.
Ok, der Bernie sterk.
Han har preachet dette siden 70-tallet, han, så det ikke noe nytt fra hans side.
Han trenger ikke å lese dette på lapp, han.
Nei, han har det impregnert det her.
To eliminate all out-of-pocket expenses, all deductibles, all co-payments. Nobody in America will pay more than $200 a year for prescription drugs because we're going to stand up to the greed and corruption and price fixing of the pharmaceutical industry. We need a healthcare system.
Nei, han sterk, altså. Det her han veldig sterk.
Han det.
As every other major country does, not a system which provides $100 billion a year in profit for the drug companies and the insurance companies. And to tell you how absurd the system is, tonight on ABC, the healthcare industry will be advertising, telling you how bad Medicare for all is because they want to protect their profits. That is absurd.
Han forutså det her i siste debatt også, at de kom til å drive med reklame i pausen.
My health care plan significantly cut the cost of it. Largest out-of-pocket payment you'll pay is $1,000. You'll be able to get into anyone who can't afford it gets automatically enrolled in the Medicare type option we have, et cetera. But guess what? Of the 160 million people who like their health care now, they can keep it. If they don't like it, they can leave, number one. Number two, the fact of the matter is we're in a situation where, if you notice, he hadn't answered the question. This is about candor, honesty, big ideas. Well, let's have a big idea. The tax of 2% that the senator's talking about, that raises about $3 billion. Guess what? That leaves you about $28 billion short. The senator said before it's going to cost you in your paycheck. It will be a deductible in your paycheck. You're going to, the middle-class person, someone making 60 grand with 3 kids, they're going to end up paying $5,000 more. They're going to end up paying 4% more on their income tax. That's a reality. Now, it's not about
Bernie.
I don't like it. Okay, I'm never going to keep it at the time, but you did invoke both senators. I have to get responses to them, and then we will go on out. Senator Warren, you go first.
So let's be clear. I've actually never met anybody who likes their health insurance company. I've met people who like their doctors. I've met people who like their nurses. I've met people who like their pharmacists. Met people who like their physical therapists. What they want is access to health care. And we just need to be clear about what Medicare for All is all about. Instead of paying premiums into insurance companies and then having insurance companies build their profits by saying no to coverage, we're going to do this by saying everyone is covered by Medicare for All. Every health care provider is covered. And the only question here in terms of difference is where to send the bill.
Senator Sanders.
Let us be clear, Joe. In the United States of America, we are spending twice as much per capita on health care as the Canadians or any other major country on earth.
This is America.
Yeah, but Americans don't want to pay twice as much as other countries.
Det var dårlig svar av Biden, altså. Hva faen?
Så da han angra, eller?
Ja.
Han angra med en gang det kom ut.
Maybe you're running to people who love their premiums. I haven't. What people want is cost-effective health care. Medicare for All will save the average American substantial sums of money on his or her health care bill.
Senator Klobuchar, you said in your opening statement you want to represent the people stuck in the middle of the extremes. Who represents the extreme on this stage?
I think you know that I don't agree with some of these proposals up here, George. So I'm talking
Which
about
ones?
if I could respond to some of the proposals from my friends. First of all, Senator Sanders and I have worked valiantly to bring down the cost of pharmaceuticals. That was a Klobuchar-Sanders amendment to allow for drugs to come in from less expensive countries like Canada. We have worked to bring down the cost by fighting to allow 43 million seniors, that's a bill I lead, to negotiate for better prices under Medicare. I figure that's a lot of seniors and they should be allowed to get a better price. But when it comes to our health care and when it comes to our premiums, I go with the doctor's creed, which is do no harm. And while Bernie wrote the bill, I read the bill. And on page 8, of the bill, it says that we will no longer have private insurance as we know it. And that means that 149 million Americans will no longer be able to have their current insurance. That's in 4 years. I don't think that's a bold idea. I think it's a bad idea.
Angrep på hans plan, så da må jeg få svare.
What Barack Obama wanted to do from the very beginning, and that is a public option, a non-profit choice that will bring down the cost of insurance, cover 12 million more people, and bring down the prices for 13 million more people. That is a bold idea.
Senator Warren. Page 8 of the bill, she says, 149 people.
Fikk veldig mye applaus for det. Nei, Biden får ikke svare.
Bernie.
Nei, Bernie, ja.
149 million.
Excuse me.
So let's be clear about this. People
Det rart at ikke Bernie fikk svare på den.
Det var jo et direkte angrep på hans plan. Har jo Warren akkurat samme plan da, bare kopier limen, så kanskje vi
den sier jo det ofte.
får lov til å prøve å
som
forsvare.
Bernie sin plan. Bruker hun som reklame.
Family members won't have to get into these battles. What this is about is making sure that we have the most efficient way possible to pay for health care for everyone in this country. Insurance companies last year sucked $23 billion in profits out of the system. How did they make that money? Every one of those $23 billion was made by an insurance company saying no to your health care coverage.
Mayor Buttigieg.
The problem, Senator Sanders,
Bernie gestikulerer og får fortsatt ikke snakke, altså.
is that it doesn't trust the American people. I trust you.
Det jo egentlig latterlig, for de diskuterer jo hans plan.
Altså, han får sikkert svare til slutt, men
det var kanskje litt på
hørte hva Buttigieg sa, at de ikke stoler på hans plan, men at han ikke stoler på folket, men at han stoler på folket. Altså at Bernie ikke stoler på folket, men at han stoler på folket.
Han vil ha et private insurance option, da.
Jeg for så vidt ikke uenig med at det kan være greit å ha en mulighet for det, men de undervurderer planen til Bernie, altså.
Ja, der jeg enig med deg, for jeg ikke helt... Jeg har ikke bestemt meg, men jeg klarer ikke å make up my mind på en måte, men det ganske mange gode argumenter for at det ikke skal være lov å forsikre seg og dermed få en bedre helseplan enn de som ikke har råd til å gjøre det. Da får de som ikke har penger...
Og levere før alle andre, liksom.
Ja, de som ikke har pengene til det får dårligere healthcare. Det jo ikke greit.
No more than $200 a year for prescription drugs. Taking on the drug companies and the insurance companies, moving to Medicare for all is the way to go.
Senator Harris, you started out
vondt I halsen min av å høre på stemmen til Bernie.
Why?
I want to give credit first to Barack Obama for really bringing us this far. We would not be here if he hadn't the courage, the talent, or the will to see us this far. I want to give credit to Bernie. Take credit, Bernie. You know, you brought us this far on Medicare for all. I support Medicare for all, I always have, but I wanted to make the plan better, which I did.
Take credit, som om han stod og ventet på at henne skulle gi han credit.
So under my Medicare for all plan, people have the choice of a private plan or a public plan because that's what people want. And I agree we shouldn't take choice from people. But here's the thing. Everybody on this stage,
det en ting vi pratet om I siste episode, så hun så fuckings falsk.
Ja. Hun snur på en mynt. Ja, meningene sine.
At least 5 people have talked some repeatedly on this subject, and not once have we talked about Donald Trump. So let's talk about the fact that Donald Trump came into office and spent almost the entire first year of his term trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. We all fought against it, and then the late, great John McCain, at that moment at about 2 o'clock in the morning, killed his attempt to take health care from millions of people in this country. Fast forward to today, and what is happening? Donald Trump's Department of Justice is trying to get rid of the affordable.
Hva faen poenget med det kampanjen din å fortelle hvor ille Trump Altså,
det så tragisk.
Ja, alle demokrater.
Vis oss hva du har av konkrete planer. Du må gjøre Amerika bedre.
Alle demokratene hater han allerede. Du trenger ikke å overbevise dem om å hate han.
Nei, du trenger ikke å overbevise noen. Bare vis oss hvordan du har tenkt å gjøre landet bedre.
Det stinker jo at du ikke har et godt alternativ.
Ja, eller I hvert fall ikke noe som bedre enn de som har blitt sagt på panelet allerede.
Bare surfe, det var ingenting.
Nei. Hun poller jo lavere og lavere for hver gang da. Det jo greit.
Medicare for all, Medicare for choice. If you want Medicare, if you lose the job from your insurance company, from your employer, you automatically...
Gå vekk fra mikken. Biden, han så mess.
Period. And if you notice, nobody's yet said how much it's going to cost the taxpayer. I hear this large savings. The president think
Han ganske irritert nå. Du ser det på kroppsspråket hans.
If you negotiate his union all these years, got to cut in wages because you got insurance. They're going to give back that money to the...
Han har et poeng da. Han ingen som har nevnt hvor mye det vil koste.
For a socialist, you got a lot more confidence in corporate America than I do.
Det det her som får han til å virke, som får mange til å se på han litt som en republikaner, at han angriper de på den måten. Men han har jo helt legitime spørsmål, synes jeg. Hvor mye kommer det til å koste? Og ingen har klart å svare på det enda.
You got to defend the fact that 500,000 Americans are going bankrupt. You know why they're going bankrupt? Because they suffered a terrible disease, cancer or heart disease. Under my legislation, people will not go into financial ruin because they suffered with a diagnosis of cancer. And our program is the only one that does that.
I know a lot about cancer. Let me tell you something. It's personal to me. Let me tell you something. Every single person who is diagnosed with cancer or any other disease can automatically become part of this plan. They will not go bankrupt because of that. They will not go bankrupt because of that. They can join immediately. And we're talking 4, 6, 8, 10 years, depending on you talk about, before we get to Medicare for all. Come on. I've been there. You've been there. You know what it's like. People need help now, hope now, and do something now.
Congressman O'Rourke.
Yeah. Thank you. Listen, I'm grateful that we all agree about the urgency of this challenge and the fact that Donald Trump is undermining the limited protections that we have right now. But I also think we're being offered a false choice between those who propose an all-or-nothing gambit, forcing tens of millions off of insurance that they like, that works for them, to force them onto Medicare, and others who want to, as the Vice President does, incrementally improve what we have, which will still leave many, maybe millions, uninsured and uncared for in a state like Texas, where the largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail system. We've got to do better. In my proposal, Medicare for America says everyone who's uninsured will be enrolled in Medicare. Everyone who's insufficiently insured, cannot afford it, can move over to Medicare. And those, like members of unions who fought for the health care plans that work for them and their families, are able to keep them. That is the best possible path forward.
Healthcare is the top issue for everyone in the country. I want to make sure everyone gets 1 minute to respond. So Senator Secretary Castro, Andrew Yang, and then Senator Booker. You.
Det veldig sentralt hos de demokratiske velgerne, altså dette med Medicare for all. Så det godt at de bruker tid på dette, synes jeg.
Of course, I also work for President Obama, Vice President Biden, and I know that the problem with your plan is that it leaves 10 million people uncovered. Now, on the last debate stage in Detroit, you said that wasn't true. When Senator Harris brought that up, there was a fact check of that, and they said that was true. I grew up with a grandmother who had type 2 diabetes, and I watched her condition get worse and worse. But that whole time, she had Medicare. I want every single American family to have a strong Medicare plan available. If they choose to hold on to strong, solid private health insurance, I believe they should be able to do that. But the difference between what I support and what you support, Vice President Biden, is that you require them to opt in. And I would not require them to opt in. They would automatically be enrolled. They wouldn't have to buy in. That's a big difference, because Barack Obama's vision was not to leave 10 million people uncovered. He wanted every single person in this country covered. My plan would do that. Your plan would not.
They do not have to buy in. They do not have to buy in.
You just said that. You just said that 2 minutes ago. You just said 2 minutes ago that they would have to buy in. You said they would have to buy in.
Nei, han sa ikke det.
Han feilrepresenterer jo.
Ja, jeg sa ikke at de måtte kjøpe seg inn, han kan de melde seg inn. Det er to forskjellige ting. Nei, det er du som misforstår.
Ja.
Regardless of whether they choose to opt in or not.
Det noe annet å automatisk enrolle eller å kjøpe seg inn. Castro har lagt en stråmann og argumenterer mot en stråmann.
That's a big difference. I'm fulfilling the legacy of Barack Obama, and you're not.
I'll be surprised to him.
Andrew Yang.
This reminds everybody of what they cannot do about scoring points against each other, poking at each other, and telling each other that you're my plan, your plan. Look, we all
that's called a Democratic primary election.
That's called an election.
That's an election.
Du skjønte ikke hva Biden sa en gang.
A house divided cannot stand. And that is not how we're
Look,
going to win
everyone,
this
we know we're on the same team here. We know we're on the same team. We all have a better vision for healthcare than our current president. And I believe we're talking about this the wrong way. As someone who has run a business, I know that our current healthcare system makes it harder to hire people, makes it harder to give them benefits and treat them as full-time employees. You instead pretend they're contractors. It's harder to change jobs. It's certainly harder to start a business. The pitch we have to make to the American people is we will get the healthcare weight off of your backs and then unleash the hopes and dreams of the American people.
Senator
Now,
Booker.
I am Asian, so I know a lot of doctors. And they tell me that they spend a lot of time on paperwork, avoiding being sued, and navigating the insurance bureaucracy. We have to change the incentives so instead of revenue and activity, people are focused on our health in the healthcare system. And the Cleveland Clinic, where they're paid not based upon how many procedures they prescribe, shocker, they prescribe fewer procedures, and patient health stays the same or improves. That is the pitch to the American people.
Senator Booker, close out this discussion.
Thank you very much. Look,
Jeg kunne fått litt mer tid, da. Det første han har fått sagt.
Ja, men de har bare 1 minutt på akkurat det her med
Nå det Biden og Sanders har fått lov til å gå frem og tilbake, mens det der første gang har fått lov til å si, liksom.
De har blitt callet på navnene deres, så da har de rett på et svar.
Det sant, det sant.
One of my colleagues on this stage is in favor of universal health coverage and comes at this with the best of intentions. And I'll tell you, there is an urgency right now in this nation. Everybody feels it. And as a person who has an ideal, I know we cannot sacrifice progress on the altar of purity. Because people in my community, they need help right now. They have high blood pressure right now. They have unaffordable insulin right now. And this must be a moment where we as Democrats can begin to show that we can not only stake and stand our ground, but find common ground, because we've got one shot to make Donald Trump a one-term president.
Ikke ett ord om hva planen hans er.
Nei.
Dere beskriver en realitet, ok?
Vi har mange syke mennesker. Vi må slå Trump. Det er så gjentagende. Der Bernie er sterk, for han har plan med hvordan han skal gå frem.
Rett på hva planen er. Ikke noe...
Og det samme med jeg, så vidt også.
Their number one concern is racism. This campus, this state, and this nation are still raw from that racially motivated attack on Latinos in El Paso. Now, we know that the racial divide started long before President Trump and President Obama, but each of you on this stage has said that President Trump has made that divide worse. Congressman O'Rourke, coming to you first, why are you the most qualified candidate to address this divide?
You know, I've called this out in no uncertain terms on August 3rd and every day since then, and I was talking about it long before then as well. Racism in America is endemic. It is foundational. We can mark the creation of this country not at the 4th of July, 1776, but August 20th, 1619, when the first kidnapped African was brought to this country against his will and in bondage and as a slave, built the greatness and the success and the wealth that neither he nor his descendants would ever be able to fully participate in and enjoy. We have to be able to answer this challenge, and it is found in our education system, where in Texas, a 5-year-old child in kindergarten is 5 times as likely to be disciplined or suspended or expelled based on the color of their skin. In our healthcare system, where there's a maternal mortality crisis 3 times as deadly for women of color, or the fact that there's 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in black America. I'm going to follow Sheila Jackson Lee's lead and sign into law a reparations bill that will allow us to address this at its foundations.
Reparasjoner, ja.
Og et oppfølgingsspørsmål da. Hvem er det som skal betale? Vær så snill, kom igjen, still han der.
Håper det kommer. Og hvor mye skal vi ha? Hvem skal betale?
You know, I want to commend Beto for how well he has spoken to the passion and the frustration and the sadness after what happened in his hometown of El Paso. He's done a great job with that. Look, a few weeks ago, a shooter drove 10 hours inspired by this president to kill people who look like me and people who look like my family. White supremacy is a growing threat.
Det handler om deg.
and we have to root it out.
Ja, og alt kan dras tilbake til presidenten, selvsagt.
I'm also proud that I was the first to put forward a police reform plan, because we're not going to have any more Laquan McDonald's or Eric Garners or Michael Browns or Pamela Turners or Walter Scott's or Sandra Bland here from the Houston area. We need to root out
Husket han alle de navnene? Nei, dette pre-made speech der.
Ja, pugga det.
Altså hvis det her hadde skjedd organisk, og han hadde bare kommet med disse navnene sånn organisk, så hadde det vært, wow, du husker det, du bryr deg faktisk, men det hørtes litt som en forberedt tale.
Jeg har kjørt akkurat det narrativet 100 ganger før.
Racism exists. The question isn't who isn't a racist, it's who is and isn't doing something about racism. And this is not just an issue that started yesterday. It's not just an issue that we hear a president that can't condemn white supremacy. We have systemic racism that is eroding.
Han gikk jo rett ut og sa at han fordømmer white supremacy. Hvordan kan han si det?
So racially biased, we have more African Americans under criminal supervision today than all the slaves in 1850. We have to come at this issue attacking systemic racism, having the courage to call it out, and having a plan to do something about it. If I am president of the United States, we will create an office in the White House to deal with the problem of white supremacy and hate crimes. And we will make sure that systemic racism is dealt with in substantive plans, from criminal justice reform to the disparities in healthcare.
Han snakker om systemisk rasisme, men han nevner ikke hvilket system. Er det hele systemet, eller er det i alle stater? Er det i alle delstater? Er det i fengselssystemet? Han sier ikke hvor denne systemiske rasismen er. Hvordan skal man slåss mot den da? Så det er ikke noe å benekte at det er rasisme i USA, men man må jo være litt mer spesifikk. Man kan ikke bare skrike rasisme.
Jeg synes hele den spørsmålsrunden rundt rasisme ble egentlig helt latterlig, fordi nå skal de bare gå innom alle kandidatene, og så skal de bare høre hva er det du skal gjøre, og så må neste, altså, de må prøve å liksom toppe hverandre da, hvis du skjønner hva jeg mener. Det ble egentlig bare helt latterlig. Og jeg vil gjøre det, og ja, du vil gjøre det, men jeg vil gjøre det her, jeg vil gjøre enda mer.
I have proposed the most comprehensive vision to tackle systemic racism in every one of these areas, marshalling as many resources as went into the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe, but this time a Douglas Plan that we invest right here at home, to make sure that we're not only dealing with things like the over-incarceration of Black Americans, but also Black solutions, entrepreneurship, raising to 25% the target for the federal government to do business with minority-owned businesses, investing in HBCUs that are training and educating the next generation of entrepreneurs. We can and must do that, but that means transcending this framework that pits us against each other, that pits a single Black mother of three against a displaced auto worker. Because where I come from, a lot of times that displaced auto worker is a single Black mother of three. We've got to say that and bring people together.
Veldig bra. Han spiller ikke på denne polariseringen, men han ser etter løsninger. Det synes jeg er det.
Han gjør det.
Det er det som de mange andre kandidater gjør. Ja. Men det er så mange andre kandidater som spiller på polariseringen og skriker rasisme uten å komme med løsninger, men han har faktisk konkrete løsninger.
Man merker det når jeg snakker også, at han vil ikke snakke om disse identitetspolitiske temaene hele tiden.
Ja. Helt riktig.
So I'm glad you asked me this question, and there have been many
Hva var spørsmålet om? Var det om fengsel og hennes historikk?
I made a decision to become a prosecutor for two reasons.
Ja.
One, I've always wanted to protect people and keep them safe. And second, I was born knowing about how this criminal justice system in America has worked in a way that has been informed by racial bias. And I could tell you extensively about the experiences I and my family members have personally had.
Var det derfor hun blokket bevis for å løsslippe disse menneskene som var på death row? Svarte mennesker som hun blokket bevisene mot?
That allowed me, without asking permission, to create one of the first in the nation initiatives that was a model and became a national model around people who were arrested for drugs and getting them jobs. I created one of the first in the nation requirements that a state law enforcement agency would have to wear cameras and keep them on full time. I created one of the first in the nation trainings for police officers on the issue of racial bias and the need to reform the system. Was I able to get enough done? Absolutely not. But my plan has been described by activists as being a bold and comprehensive plan that is about ending mass incarceration, about taking the profit out of the criminal justice system. I plan
Derfor du ler av de som fengslet på marijuana charges.
Akkurat det jeg skulle si. Hun vil ende mass incarceration, men hun var jo en korsfarer når det hjalp å fengsle folk for cannabis-relaterte
kriminalitet. Det er så jævlig irriterende med henne at hun sier en ting, og så viser historikken hennes en
helt annen
historie.
And that we work on keeping families intact. And as President of the United States, knowing the system from the inside, I will have the ability to be an effective
Hvis ikke hun hadde hatt den hudfargen hun har, så hadde hun ikke kommet noen vei I dette.
Hun hadde blitt kalt mye rart. Hun hadde blitt kalt lenger høyere enn det hun da, for å si det sånn.
Critics say that too often you sided with police in these cases. The ACLU's legal director in Minnesota has said that you showed no interest in racial justice. Do you wish now that you had done more?
That's not my record. We are here at a historically black college. And I think of an alum of that college, Barbara Jordan, and something that she once said. She said, what the people want is simple. They want a country as good as its promise. And that same can be said of the criminal justice system. So when I was there, the way we handled these police shootings, I actually took a stand to make sure outside investigators handled them. I took on our major police chief in Minneapolis. But in the prosecutor's office, they were handled with the grand jury. That's how they were all handled across our state. I now believe it is better for accountability if the prosecutor handles them and makes those decisions herself. That aside, I am proud of the work our staff did, 400 people in our office. The cases that came to us, the African-American community that came to us, they said there was no justice for their little kids. There was a kid named Byron Phillips that was shot on his front porch. No one had bothered to figure out who did it. When I came into that office, we worked with the community groups, we put up billboards, we found the shooter, and we put him in jail. We did the same for the killer of a little girl named Taisha Edwards, who was doing her homework at her kitchen table and was shot through the window. What changes did we make? Go after white-collar crimes in a big way. Diversify the office in a big way. Work with the Innocence Project to make sure we do much better with eyewitness ID. And as a senator and as your president, I will make sure that we don't just do the First Step Act when it comes to criminal sentencing, that we move to the Second Step Act, which means the 90% of people that are incarcerated in local and state jails, let's reduce those sentences for nonviolent offenders, and let's get them jobs and let them vote when they get out of prison.
Thank you, Senator.
Jeg synes hun hadde et bra svar der, altså hun spiller ikke på denne identitetspolitikken, og hun også har litt løsninger. Ikke like bra som Buttigieg, men ja.
Hun sterk, hun.
Ja, I hvert fall på akkurat det der.
Well, first of all, let me say that when I came back from law school, I had a job with a big-time law firm. I left and became a public defender because my state was under siege. When Dr. King was assassinated, we were occupied by the National Guard for 10 months. I've been involved from the beginning. As a young congressman, as a young councilman, I introduced legislation to try to keep them putting a sewer plant in the poor neighborhood. I made sure that we dealt with redlining.
Der handler bare om hvem som kan gjøre mest mot rasisme. Skal vi spole litt frem og så ta en pause, eller?
Ja, vi får høre hva de har å si. Kanskje det kommer noen åpenbaringer, men jeg tror jo ikke det. Det jo ting vi har hørt 1 million ganger før.
Akkurat der synes jeg moderatorene gjør en en skikkelig dårlig jobb.
Ja, helt enig.
Legger det opp til at
det essensielle problemet I hele USA dette, men det jo ikke det.
Og at de liksom må toppe hverandre. Det neste må ha en større og bedre plan enn det neste personen.
Det en pissekonkurranse.
Nobody who got in prison for marijuana, for example, immediately upon being released, they shouldn't be in there for that should be a misdemeanor. They should be out and their record should be expunged. Every single right should be returned. When you finish your term in prison, you should be able not only vote, but have access to Pell Grants, have access to be able to get housing, have access to be able to move along the way. I've laid out a detailed plan along those lines. And the fact is we've learned so much more.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Senator Booker, 45 seconds to respond.
Ok, han avsluttet seg selv,
Ja, han gjør alltid det.
Det hyggelig.
Between blacks, whites, and Latinos for using drugs or dealing drugs. But if you're African American,
Ja, dette jo det dette jo hans hovedplattform.
Ja, det helt riktig. Dette han fokuserer på mest.
We have a criminal justice system that Brian Stevenson says treats you better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. And so I have challenged this whole field. We can specifically and demonstratively now show that there are 17,000 unjustly incarcerated in America, and all of us should come forward and say, when we are president of the United States, when I am president of the United States, we will release them. And let me be specific. I joined together and led in the United States Senate the only major bipartisan bill passed under this president for criminal justice reform that has already led to thousands of people coming out of jail. If 87 members of the United States Senate says that these sentences are way too long, and we changed it, but we didn't make it retroactive, we could literally point to the people that are in jail unjustly right now. Everyone on this stage should say that we are going to give clemency to these 17,000 people. And I challenge you, don't just say big statements, back it up with details of the people in prison right now looking for one of the most sacrosanct ideals of this nation, which is liberty and freedom.
Oi,
kamera bare forsvant litt. Tatt seg en whisky, han som styrer kamera.
I want to turn to the deadly mass shootings here in this country, and of course we are all mindful tonight of where we stand. We are here in Texas tonight, where 29 people have lost their lives in just the last month alone. El Paso, which we've discussed, in Odessa.
Okay, gun violence.
Survivors from El Paso right here in the hall tonight. Vice President Biden, I do want to direct this to you because we all remember Sandy Hook. 26 people died in that school, 20 of them children. Those first graders would be in 8th grade today. At the time, there was a groundswell in this country to get something done. President Obama asked you to lead the push for gun control. You have often pointed to your ability to reach across the aisle to get things done. But 4 months after Sandy Hook, a measure to require expanded background checks died on the Senate floor. If you couldn't get it done after Sandy Hook, why should voters give you another chance?
The guy's done before. I'm the only one up here who's ever beat the NRA. Only one ever beat the NRA nationally. I'm the guy that brought the Brady Bill into focus and became law. And so that's number one. Number two, after Sandy Hook, a number of things happened. It went from a cause to a movement. Look what's happened now. Mothers, the organization, Mothers Against Violence, gun violence. We've seen what's happened again. Now we have all these young people marching on Washington, making sure that things are going to change. There has been a sea change. Those proposals I put forward for the president had over 50% of members of the NRA supporting them, and overwhelmingly the rest of the people supporting them. Now the numbers are much higher because they realize what I've been saying, and we've all been saying.
90%
of the American people think we have to get assault weapons off the street, period, and we have to get buybacks and get them out.
Han drar alltid tilbake til dette hva han gjorde under Obama, men han har ikke noe.
Virker som
han liksom faller sammen etter hvert inn I debatten her, liksom.
Han gjør det.
Han har ikke energien til å holde det gående lenge.
Veldig usikker I svarene sine, har jeg inntrykk av.
Rotete all over the place, liksom.
Ja. Jeg liker Biden, altså, men jeg mistenker at årene begynner å ta på litt.
Ser for deg han I debatt med Trump, da.
Ja, altså Trump jo pumpet full av Adderall, sikkert, så han betraktelig mye mer energi, I hvert fall.
Your first 100 days, including banning imports of AR-15 assault weapons.
That's right.
President Obama, after Sandy Hook, more than 23 executive actions, and yet here we all are today. In recent days, former Vice President Biden has said about executive orders, some really talented people are seeking the nomination. They said, I'm going to issue an executive order. Biden saying there's no constitutional authority to issue that executive order when they say I'm going to eliminate assault weapons, saying you can't do it by executive order any more than Trump can do things when he says he can do it by executive order. Does the vice president have a point there?
Some things you can, many things you can't.
Let's let the senator answer.
Well, I mean, I would just say, hey, Joe,
Biden.
instead of saying, no, we can't, let's say, yes, we can.
Fy søren, det var et dårlig svar, altså.
Yes, we can, because I'll tell you something. The way that I think about this is I've seen more autopsy photographs than I care to tell you. I have attended more police officer funerals than I care to tell you. I have hugged more mothers of homicide victims than I care to tell you. And the idea that we would wait for this Congress, which has just done nothing, to act is just, it is overlooking the fact that every day in America, our babies are
hun
going to
ønsker jo å
school
bruke en
to have
executive
drills,
order for å endre
elementary, middle, and
grunnloven,
high
som
school
retten til å ha våpen.
where they are
Kan man
learning
ikke gjøre med en
about how
executive
they
order.
have to
Og det
hide
det
in a
Biden har callet
closet
henne ut
or
på, og da
crouch
sier
in a
hun
corner if there
la
is
oss
a
ikke si at vi ikke
masked
kan,
shooter
men la oss bare si at
roaming
vi
the
kan.
hallways of
Da
our
dette
school. I was talking about this at one of my town halls, and this child, it was 8 years old probably, came up to me,
Står
it
i
was like it was a
grunnloven, du kan
secret
ikke
between
endre
the two of us, and he
executive
tucked
order.
on my jacket and he
Kanskje hun vil
said,
endre
I
grunnloven?
had to have one of those drills.
Ja, men hun kan ikke gjøre det
It's
uten alene. Hun trenger
traumatizing
jo,
our children. El Paso and
for det
Beto,
to
God love you
forskjellige
for
terms
standing
som
so
må kunne
courageously in
gjennomføre
the
det,
midst
ikke
of that
bare
tragedy.
én
You know,
term.
people asked me in El Paso, they said, you know, because I have a long-standing record on this issue, they said, well, do you think Trump is responsible for what happened? And I said, well, look,
Litt usikker på om det er i hvert fall sånn i Norge. Man må ha to forskjellige sittende storting som gjør det, som endrer på det.
Senator Harris, thank you. Vice President Biden, do you still stand by
Jeg har ikke peiling.
What I said was, the question, speak to constitutional scholars. If in fact we could say, by the way, you can't own the following weapons, period. They cannot be sold anymore. Check with constitutional scholars. Now, you
Mr. Vice
can't
President,
say-
thank you.
Altså, her svarer han
I'm
hvordan loven er. Og hun har jo vært en statsadvokat, hun burde vite dette. Jeg skulle tro hun bare sier det for å få stemmer.
Some on this stage have suggested a voluntary buyback for guns in this country. You've gone further. You said, quote, Americans who own AR-15s and AK-47s will have to sell them to the government, all of them. You know the critics call this confiscation. Are you proposing taking away their guns, and how would this work?
I am, if it's a weapon that was designed to kill people on a battlefield. If the high impact, high velocity round, when it hits your body, shreds everything inside of your body because it was designed to do that so that you would bleed to death on a battlefield and not be able to get up and kill one of our soldiers. When we see that being used against children, and in Odessa, I met the mother of a 15-year-old girl who was shot by an AR-15, and that mother watched her bleed to death over the course of an hour because so many other people were shot by that AR-15 in Odessa and Midland. There weren't enough ambulances to get to them in time. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
Congressman, thank you.
And I want to say this. I'm listening to the people of this country the day after I proposed
The Second Amendment. Every American has the right to bear arms.
to meet with those who are selling AR-15s and AK-47s and those who are buying those weapons. And you might be surprised, there was some common ground there. Folks who said, I would willingly give that up, cut it to pieces. I don't need this weapon to hunt, to defend myself. It is a weapon of war. So let's do the right thing, but let's bring everyone in America into the conversation. Republicans, Democrats, gun owners, and non-gun owners alike.
May I make a point?
Congressman, thank you. I want to bring in Senator Klobuchar on this because you've often talked about your uncle and the proud hunters back home in Minnesota. So I wanted to get your response to Congressman O'Rourke tonight. Where do you stand on mandatory gun buybacks?
I so appreciate what the congressman's been doing, and I want to remind people here that what unites us is so much bigger than what divides us. Everyone up here favors an assault weapon ban. Everyone up here favors magazine limitations, which, by the way, would have made a huge difference if that was in place in El Paso in that store where all those ordinary people showed such extraordinary courage. And certainly in Dayton, Ohio, where in 30 seconds, one man guns down innocent people. The cops got there in 1 minute, and it still wasn't enough to save those people. That's what unites us. You know what else unites us? And I'll tell you this. What unites us is that right now, on Mitch McConnell's desk are 3 bills. Universal background checks, closing the Charleston loophole, and passing my bill to make sure that domestic abusers don't get AK-47.
Senator
So
Klobuchar.
we want to get something done. And I personally think we should start with a voluntary buyback program. That's what I think, David. But I want to finish this, because if you want action now, we got to send a message to Mitch McConnell. We can't wait until one of us gets in the White House. We have to pass those bills right now to get this done.
Senator
because we
Klobuchar.
cannot spare another innocent life.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to turn to Senator Booker, because you have said just this week about guns and about the candidates on this stage that the differences do matter. Those were your words. You have argued if you need a license to drive a car in this country, you should have a license to buy a gun. Gun owners would not only have to pass a background check, they would have to obtain a federal license to buy a gun. This would require, as you know, Congress to pass legislation. If Democrats can't get universal background checks, how would you get this done? And can you name one Republican colleague of yours in the Senate right now who would be on board with this idea?
So background checks and gun licensing, these are agreed to by overwhelmingly the majority of Americans. 83% of Americans agree with licensing. This is the issue. Look, I grew up in the suburbs. It was about 20 years ago that I came out of my home when I moved to inner city Newark, New Jersey, and witnessed the aftermath of a shooting. It's one of the reasons why shooting after shooting after shooting in neighborhoods like mine for decades, this has been a crisis for me. It's why I was the first person to come out for gun licensing. And I'm happy that people like Beto O'Rourke are showing such courage now and coming forward and also now supporting licensing. But this is what I'm sorry about. I'm sorry that it had to take issues coming to my neighborhood or personally affecting Beto to suddenly make us demand change. This is a crisis of empathy in our nation. We are never going to solve this crisis if we have to wait for it to personally affect us or our neighborhood or our community before we demand action. You want to know how we get this done? We get this done by having a more courageous empathy where people don't wait for this hell to visit upon their communities. They stand up and understand the truth of what King said, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I will lead change on this issue because I have seen what the carnage creates in communities like mine.
Ok, men hva faktisk planen hans? Det å ta våpnene, altså ikke å kjøpe de tilbake, sånn som Klobuchar vil, men bare ta dem.
Ja, han ønsker å ta det tilbake, virker det som. Men de sier ikke noe om hvordan de ønsker å forholde seg eller ikke forholde seg til The Second Amendment.
Nei, altså akkurat den talen hans nå var jo bare, det var ingenting.
Nei, da. Følelser da. Der ble han faktisk pushet litt på det. Hvordan har du tenkt å gjøre dette? Ja, han har nevnt dette allerede. Lede en bevegelse. Men hvordan? Han unngår spørsmålet igjen.
Due to gun violence in my lifetime than every single war in this country combined from the Revolutionary War till now. This is not a side issue to me. It is a central issue to me. That is the kind of fight because the majority of homicide victims every single day in communities
like mine.
Du må
torturere han om du skal ha det svaret, tror jeg.
More courageous empathy in this country so that we stand together and fight together and overwhelm those Republicans who are not even representing their constituency. Because the majority of Americans, the majority of gun owners agree with me, not the corporate gun lobby. It is time for
Enig deg,
han skal lese bevegelsen, men han har ikke sagt noe hva bevegelsen skal gå ut på. Altså, hvordan de har tenkt til å, det executive order, det, altså,
What can you get done on gun control? So let's start by framing the problem the right way. We have a gun violence problem in this country. The mass shootings are terrible. but they get all the headlines. Children die every day on streets, in neighborhoods, on playgrounds. People die from violence, from suicide and domestic abuse. We have a gun violence problem in this country, and we agree.
Flere som dør av håndvåpen. Hvorfor ønsker de ikke å fjerne det?
My view on this is it's not going to be one and done on this. We're going to do it, and we're going to have to do it again, and we're going to have to come back some more until we cut the number of gun deaths in this country significantly. But here's the deal. The question we need to ask is when we've got this much support across the country, 90% of Americans want to see us do, I like registration, want to see us do background checks, want to get assault weapons off the streets. Why doesn't it happen? And the answer is corruption, pure and simple. We have a Congress that is beholden to the gun industry.
Ikke noe om å kjøpe tilbake våpen eller ta våpenet, det er Congress som står bak dette.
We're not going to get anything done on guns. I was in the United States Senate when 54 senators said, let's do background checks, let's get rid of assault weapons. And with 54 senators, it failed because of the filibuster. Until we attack the systemic problems, we can't get gun reform in this country. We've got to go straight against the industry, and we've got to change Congress so it doesn't just work for the wealthy and wealthy.
Jeg har ikke hørt noen enda forsvare viktigheten av the Second Amendment, men det virker som at alle vil bare gjøre det ulovlig.
Her tror jeg det er bred enighet om at den kan egentlig bare fjernes.
Ja, det virker sånn. Det er jo en litt skummel president å fjerne liksom en av de mest sentrale tingene i grunnloven.
Den andre.
Ja, nummer 2.
Ja.
Etter ytringsfrihet.
The gun legislation that people here are talking about, Medicare for all, climate change legislation that saves the planet. I will not wait for 60 votes to make that happen. And you could do it in a variety of ways. You could do that through budget reconciliation.
Bernie er rett på sak hver gang, altså. Nesten hver gang.
Hva er det? Hva han vil gjøre, og hvordan han skal gjøre det. Ingen sånn følsom tale om å lede en bevegelse. Nei, fuck det.
Eller at jeg så moren hennes holde barnet hennes, altså, som for så vidt er trist, men ja, vi kommer ikke noen vei med den retorikken.
And that means whether it is the drug companies or the insurance companies or the fossil fuel industry determining what's happening.
Bernie bra hver gang. Han har letteste kampanjen, for han går bare tilbake til det samme hver gang, og det er så sant.
The President of the United States and the Republican leadership. I am proud that year after year I had an F rating from the NRA. And as president, I will not be intimidated by the NRA.
Senator Sanders, thank you.
Mine damer og herrer, det var det vi rakk for denne gang. Tune inn neste uke for å høre del 2. Vel møtt!